subscribe.
Popcorn therapy. Holistic health and wellness through the lens of pop culture. This is a show where we take a dip, sometimes shallow, sometimes deep, into the archetypes, symbols, mythologies, systems, and implications of whatever movie or TV show I am watching this week. Okay, welcome back again to Popcorn Therapy. We are on our part 2 of Love is Blind season 7, and Emilee Nimetz is back with me to discuss that. So in part 1, we discussed Love is Blind season 7 in general, and we were talking about the general dehumanization of the couples, how they really treat each other like possessions. There was a real theme of monstrosity as we were recording right before Halloween. It felt like a very spooky season kind of thing to be talking about, because really I think some of the men specifically on this particular season are quite monstrous. So in the first part of this episode, we focused mostly on Leo and Brittany, Marissa and Ramses, and Hannah and Nick. We didn't have a chance to get to the others. We had not watched the reunion last time we recorded. We have now watched the reunion. So Emilee, tell me what you think about the season 7 reunion.
Okay, well, first and foremost, it was quite boring. I find that, kind of similar to what I was saying in the last episode, just the hyper awareness of image and all of that seemed to really play a big deal, I guess, into, the conversations that were had. I feel like sometimes we're hoping that the reunions are going to be a little bit juicier, like we're going to see, on the internet, people are saying, oh, we wanted people to be held accountable. But I do sort of like get the sense of like, is that really going to happen on like an hour edited little thing where part of it is, the producers trying to promote the show in general. So I feel like it was kind of expected that a lot of the conflict would be sort of downplayed, or that there would be these like moments of trying to like just be like tying a ribbon on it and being like, okay, well, instead of, I think even in past reunions where it was just like, what do you have to say about that? Like, what do you have to say for yourself? We didn't quite get that like same kind of questioning that we got in previous iterations of it. I do feel like in the Nick and Hannah of it all, like not to kind of continue to talk about that relationship, but I do feel like I saw an ickiness about this Nick guy that I didn't see in the show. Like I feel like the image that he was trying and very obviously trying to like maintain throughout the filming kind of unraveled a bit, and I found it very frustrating in that moment when there was this back and forth of what he may or may not have said about Hannah and her appearance, that none of the other men were really speaking up. Like, I guess Steven kind of did and Ramses sort of did, but it seemed really vague. And I kind of was frustrated that it's like, all of you are really going to go down for this guy who's kind of like doesn't know how to cook pasta. Like, what? What are we doing here? So it made me feel a little bit like there was a bit more like sinister feeling around him that I didn't quite get from, like, he seemed just kind of like a dumb himbo in the show, where I was just like, oh, he's kind of helpless and like doesn't know how to do anything, and Hannah's being really hard on him. Whereas now I sort of felt like there's probably a little bit, more going on there. And I also want to say too on that it seems like the fans are just really, they come so hard for Hannah, but the men do not get the same kind of hate thrown at them. I do feel like I mean, they do get a lot of, like, don't get me wrong, they do get some hate thrown at them, but it did feel sort of like especially targeted and especially misogynistic, like the ways, like she was kind of like, yeah, I apologize. Like, sure, her apology wasn't this like profound, heartfelt thing. I don't think you're going to really get that in the format of this reunion. But I do feel like they were trying to be like, also you were so mean. And she's like, yeah, I know, I addressed that. And I just felt like, what are we doing, like hounding on this woman who was like, yeah, she was kind of cruel, but she wasn't like, I don't know, she didn't like lie about having children, or she didn't like have like a sex addiction and like go off and drunken text someone while at a sleep study, which, okay, maybe he did have some thoughts on that. But yeah, in general, I felt it was mostly very boring.
I agree that the reunion was incredibly boring. It was the lukewarm tea that we had kind of been expecting it to be. I think what was really hard for me to watch was the couples repeating the same dynamics that they had had on the shows. So Hannah and Nick, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's like, yeah, I'm bitchy, but I'm not really gonna. I haven't changed. You know, it sort of seemed like. But it was just watching their back and forth bickering that was just exactly the same as it had been in the show. I feel like there were a lot of other interactions that happened between the couples that felt very much like rehashing this old stuff. That it's a year old at this point. They record the reunion a year later, and it was just, there was something heart sinking for me about watching these people not have learned anything,
Yeah.
not have changed at all, not have reconciled in any way. Like they were just still in that exact same place that they had been. And we talked a lot in in part one about just the way that they're not treating each other like human beings in relationships. It's so competitive the way they're treating each other. And it felt like Hannah and Nick were competing over who was the villain. And who was right or wrong. And I mean, you know, that's an argument that couples can get into, like, I'm right and you're wrong or whatever it is, but that's not useful. Like, that's not actually the argument that gets you forward in your relationships, because you're competing rather than trying to get on the same page about something. And so I felt like it was just the whole season I found really disturbing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that added to it was just this kind of like, okay, nothing has changed. Nothing is different. These people are still treating each other the exact same way. They haven't learned anything about themselves or each other. It just felt really like, oh, that's all we get, and that's all you get. Like it was just really disappointing, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really disappointing. And the objectification seemed to be a theme that came out again in the reunion. Like, gosh, who was it that was comparing a woman to food? Steak and pasta. Leo. I was like, this is psychopath behavior. Oh, I couldn't decide between. It's like, these are human beings. And it was funny because he almost acknowledged that. Like, he was like, I realized I wasn't treating them like human beings. And then he proceeded to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I couldn't decide between steak and pasta. It was like, you mean one woman or a different woman? And maybe like, and it was very much what we had said last time, where it was like, oh, you're so excited by your toys. And you're like, I want to play these toys. Wait, these toys have feelings. And like, so
Absolutely.
I felt that was just a harrowing truth that we all kind of knew all along.
I think it was kind of sweet that Leo and Brittany are apparently best friends now. That was a twist I wasn't expecting. Lukewarm twist, but
Lukewarm
twist all the same.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny to see her try to answer these questions about like her body language and all of this stuff, and she's sort of chalking it up to being uncomfortable overall as opposed to uncomfortable with him, which I'm like, that's an interesting PR spin of what was probably your discomfort, like with your neck sort of like going away from him, like as if you're opposites on a magnet, but like,
yeah,
sure. Yeah, I found also a lot, like I find, in the conversation about dehumanization, Tim was really quite hard to watch. I mean, a lot of that conversation I just tuned out because it just was the same thing and it was just fighting, and no one was really like managing that conversation or facilitating it for them. It was just like, here you go, yell at each other. Like, this will be entertaining. Which it was maybe for a bit, but ultimately I didn't think that it was super entertaining to watch. I mostly felt kind of like sad for both of them. And again with Tim, like it was kind of scary to me to watch the way that he interacted with the other men and like how much respect he had for these other men and just all of the men in general. Like that moment when Garrett sort of jumped to, I don't know if it was Ramses's defense, like I forget who it was, when he was like, I want to stop talking about this. And it was like, no one's talking about you. Like you actually, this isn't to do with you. And I felt that was really like, he was trying to shut the woman up in that moment, like whoever it was referring to. I thought that was really gross, and it made me really just. I mean, I kind of felt like Garrett and Taylor the whole time were a bit sort of like just whatever. Like I didn't really. Their relationship was kind of boring to watch, which is sometimes like maybe the healthiest dynamics is when they're when the relationships are boring to watch. But that did make me feel kind of cringy about him. And then just all of the stuff that came up about how he's not how they didn't move across the country for her family, and now they're back in his hometown, which seems like this kind of like really small town, and so now they're going to move to DC, which is like where the show was filming. So I'm a bit confused about his promises that he made to her, and which I think is really common for a lot of men to do, especially in my experience when I did used to date men, where it was like they'll just promise anything, but ultimately they're going to do whatever they want, which I really felt for Taylor in that moment. I mean, I think they were trying to seem like a really uniform couple, but I did feel a bit like, oh, so you didn't even try living on the coast? Like, what about her parents? Like, I understand that you have your parents, and like that's obvious. That's why long distance is so hard. Like, that's why a lot of the times like couples break up over these kind of more just like lifestyle things, not because of some big argument, but it was really hard. I was just like, what about Taylor? Like, what about her needs that she expressed very clearly on while you were in the pods? So I kind of questioned that whole decision, and I was a bit like, oh no, is he this kind of controlling man who, takes over in this insidious way, because like he had this like fresh face and whatever, and like whole new look that it's like, okay,
Garrett's into fashion now.
Yeah, he's apparently into fashion now. Like, okay.
I think Tim is another one that probably has quite a bit of trauma. I think he was the one whose sisters died?
Yeah.
That was Tim, right? Yeah. And so, there were some indications, I think, with how his family talked about him, and, them being like, he doesn't really open up to anyone and all these things. Like having your two sisters die, I mean, that's highly traumatic alone. And who knows what else was going on in that family. But, it kind of makes sense to me that he couldn't sort of handle the intimacy of a real relationship. And there was a moment where he said, like, I never get mad. Like, if you get me mad, that's going to be really bad. And in that moment, I was like, ooh, alarm. Like, that is a massive red flag. If you think your intimate partner is never going to get you mad, that's just not going to happen, And also there's something about, like, if you get me mad, like, again, it's going back to Ramses and that kind of like, it's your fault, you're the one, like, if you can just do it right, then, all of these things. And I feel like by the end, that horrible breakup where he was staring at Alex with these cold, dead eyes, just saying, you dared to take a nap and you didn't know that mattered to me. And even my husband was a little triggered by that scene, I think, because he was like, oh, did you do something wrong that you had no idea was the wrong thing to do and now you're in trouble for it? Like, like, oh no, that's something that can happen, right?
Yeah.
Where people get mad about something that that you didn't know it was a value, you didn't know it mattered, She took a nap and he was cold to her. And I was furious about that because of the way he treated her dad. Like her dad, has MS, I think it is. He got up the energy and the courage to like not only go and meet this stranger, but on TV. And they had this conversation where he's had tears in his eyes and everything from Tim, like asking for, her hand in marriage and all these things, which is its own problematic issue that happened way too many times in this season. Yeah. That whole asking for her hand and language, like you're leaving her in good hands. Like, she's not an object.
Fine.
Again.
She's an adult. She's
an adult. That she can make her own decisions and she can still have a relationship with her dad once she's married. Like that doesn't, Anyway, it's wild. But anyway, they had that conversation. It was very moving, I thought, very sweet. And then 2 days later, he's sitting down with her being like, because you had a nap, I can never forgive you and I never want to see you again. And poor Alex is like, oh God, like if I'd known, I shouldn't have had a nap. I wonder if she felt some of the same shame that Marissa possibly felt and you and I have experienced, where you're just like, oh my gosh, if I only could have been the person that they wanted me to be, they wouldn't have rejected me and humiliated me so deeply, when actually it's the other way around, right? It's kind of like, you are a normal human being. You must be allowed to have flaws in a relationship. Like, you can't have a relationship if it's not possible for you to have flaws or misunderstand something or do something wrong or not know, not read someone's mind. Like that has to be allowed, and with a lot of these relationships, it was not allowed. And I found him just genuinely chilling in that moment. And I'm sure that it's trauma related for him, which does not make it okay. Like I would never want to spend time with that guy. Like, I think he's very scary.
He was, that was really chilling. And even I think back to that moment when they got into a fight that was off camera, so we only really saw the general sense of she had said something that had upset him. We don't know what was said. I don't know that we necessarily need the context, because we saw the ways in which these people dealt with the conflict after the fact, and him just sitting there like completely frozen, and her being like, I'm going to, and he's like, don't touch me. And she's just like, I'm going to touch you now. Like, and I do get a sense of like that is dicey for both folks. Like, do you really want to put your body on somebody who's like clearly doesn't want it? Like, there is a bit of a physical cue to pick up there that she didn't, but she might also have been like, this might be helpful. Like, maybe he just needs to feel me and see me, and it'll relax him to be like, you're the person that I, allegedly fell in love with, a week ago or whatever. That, this person who, again, I think that just more objectifying of like, you're a person who upset me. You are my robot, and you upset me. So now you need to turn off and not, I don't want to play with you anymore.
Totally. 100%. Yeah. I think Nick and Vanessa are really, I don't know. I mean, I want to use the words awful, bad. Like, they're not good hosts. They're just not. I mean, the jokes were so uncomfortable. Like, that moment when Nick was trying to do a transition by pretending he needed a nap, and then kind of making fun of like the sleep test, and it was just such a bad transition and felt so uncomfortable for everyone who was kind of waiting for him to finish the joke. And I feel like Vanessa has been difficult in the past too, because she's been so invested in people having babies in this way that's very uncomfortable, where she's asking people, when are you going to do it? When are you going to have these babies? And she was criticized for that last season in the reunion. And since then, some of the Love is Blind couples have come forward speaking about their fertility issues and things like that, which I really appreciate, because that's something that we don't necessarily get in a reality TV show. And to be sort of, Lauren and Cameron, who were like the original sort of best couple from season 1, they had a podcast where they were talking about how this is something that they've actually been really struggling with. So there's some reasons, Vanessa, why you shouldn't ask someone, why don't you have a baby yet? Like, maybe they don't want to talk about the traumas that they've been going through, trying to do that over the last little while. So she was backed off a little bit in that sense, but then they had Jessica from season 1, maybe, with
from
her
one.
baby, and it was and it
with
was
her
very
completely new face. Like, I was like,
she looked so different.
Yeah. At first, it took me until they said that it was Jessica. I was like, who is that? Like, I had no idea that it was her. Yeah.
But I feel like Nick and Vanessa, there's almost a cult feeling beginning with Love is Blind, I find, where if you get married, you can stay in the group, you can stay in the family, you can be taken care of and protected. But if you don't get married, you are at risk for being sort of publicly humiliated, essentially. And so I thought, I think that what a lot of us were waiting for with the reunion was what's happening with Tyler and Ashley, because by the end of the season, all we knew from the show itself was that she'd found out that he'd been a sperm donor for some close friends who were a lesbian couple, and they'd had a child from that sperm donation. He was trying to help out this queer couple, which it is strange he didn't talk about that. I feel like that's something you should be proud of. Like, you know, you were able to help this queer couple have a family. Like, that's a really wonderful thing that shouldn't be something that you're ashamed of or not talking about. I do kind of get, you know, the back end explanation that I didn't want to bring this family into it, but it also didn't make sense, right? So in social media, we were learning that the child's mom came forward, and apparently their grandma came forward as well, and there were twins born by Tyler and his original friend just having sex, like just having sex, just normal, not sperm donation, anything, but like just having a relationship. And then she got pregnant with these twins, and then he stepped in as the father figure because apparently her wife left her sort of high and dry. And again, part of the explanation Ashley was giving is, oh, you know, he was raised by a single mom, and so he felt like he had to jump in and help, and so he became this father figure to these three children. So one was legitimately a sperm donor, and the others were your run-of-the-mill accidental pregnancy children, right? And so I think a lot of us were waiting to see, okay, what's the story behind this? What's Tyler's point of view? What does Ashley do about it? I think a lot of us were thinking, oh God, Ashley, don't marry this man. Like, you don't know this whole story. And he's told you, you know, that it's something that we know now from social media that it's not, according to the children's mom and their grandma and so on. And it was really interesting to see that they were still married. They seemed completely happy together. And again, they had that sort of white glove treatment from Vanessa and Nick being like, so you're married now. That's really wonderful. Like, how is everything going in your marriage? And just sort of swallowing anything that they said to explain away this massive issue, right?
Yeah.
And the way they explained it was that Tyler didn't want to bring the family in, and there were certain things he didn't want to talk about on camera. So he lied for the cameras. And they sort of manufactured this conversation that they were having where Ashley apparently knew everything, but she was asking questions as if she didn't know. And they were kind of concealing together what was really happening there, which is like, huh? Like, what do you mean? And I feel like there were other moments, for example, when Nick and Hannah had that conversation on camera about like, listen, I don't want to talk about our sex life on camera. Like, there could have been a moment where they said something like, you know, we're not going to reveal what the issue is because it's really private and there are other people involved, but there is this big issue that we're talking about now. And so I was sort of having this moment as the viewer of like, I've been betrayed by my reality TV, which I know is reality TV. Like, we all know it's not real. And yet the reason I watch Love is Blind and I don't watch a lot of other reality TV shows is because I feel like there at least is the intention of having real people come in and try to have these real experiences and these real relationships. Like, I know a lot of it is produced, you know, there's editing, like all of these things. Of course, we're not going to get the whole story, but also I feel like it is very interesting to watch these real-ish people try to have these real-ish relationships. And, you know, several of the marriages from Love is Blind have continued to this day, like many years later, and they are very real relationships. Of course, you know, there was that season where I think everyone divorced within the year after the show finished filming and so on. But, you know, it was like, am I feeling betrayed because I feel like they should have told me more? Do I feel like I have a right to this man's private life? And yet something about this isn't sitting right with me, right? Like, it doesn't, this story's not adding up. Something's very strange about this. And I wonder if a part of it is that cult-like environment where, you know, if Ashley and Tyler stay together as a united front, they know they won't get the kind of treatment that Trevor got, you know, in the last season where I can't even remember what it was, but it was something like he was engaged when he went on the show. I think that's what it was. And people were really up in arms around that. But if he had gotten married, would it just be like, oh, we all make mistakes, it's fine? You know, would there have been a different treatment there? So I was kind of wondering, you know, also in watching a video by Guided Inspiration, who I mentioned last time, her name is Cece Rice. She was talking about Ashley's body language in that moment when Tyler was explaining and just how uncomfortable she really was, and that you could kind of see she wasn't breathing super well. She was blinking really fast, like she was kind of wiggling her legs. Like, you could see that she had some discomfort, and we don't know what that discomfort was about, but there was something so unsettling, I think, about that situation.
Yeah, part of it is like, okay, so then they came up with this whole story to enact a fight for the producers, but with a lie, like with a complete lie. Like, I mean, I guess it's not a complete lie, but like with a partial lie, like that just seems over the top. And like, I can understand, if producers are in a position where they're encouraging them to have these disputes on cameras to let the audience in. But like it is questionable because obviously there's some sort of line where the I was gonna say contestants, but like the performers, the actors, they're not those things. What are they?
They're called the cast.
The cast.
They call themselves and each other the cast.
Okay, yeah. So like there's obviously some line because we did see with Tim and Alex, there was a complete fight and they didn't recreate it. They only created like this sort of apology moment, not in Mexico. But so it's just weird to me, like the decision to then have this whole other story that you would recreate. And like, I think the other thing that is sticking out to me is the idea that like the ex kind of made this big post that folks probably saw on social media where she was kind of like, yeah, I haven't heard from him and like he's not involved in the kids' lives. So I'm like a little unclear on that. Like, sure, am I entitled to that information? Probably not. But it is just kind of like, why are these stories not lining up? Like, to go out of your way.
If he's trying to protect that family and their privacy, then why is that family coming forward and being like, hello, I want to tell you my side of the story, right?
Exactly, because it's obvious that he didn't, go into the experience being like, hey, by the way, I'm going to do this. How do you want me to talk about our situation? Like that would have been the thing to do. And then that person would have not felt compelled to be like, okay, what the hell is going on here? Like, so it is odd. And I agree with you that there is this sense of like, I think that you're really onto something with this cult like feeling, because there's also this thing with cults where it's like to question and to push back against the rules and the leadership is like a big no-no. Like you'll be humiliated for it. And it does seem like with every season that it's like Vanessa and Nick, well, their relationship is the epitome of a perfect relationship. And so you should want to be like them, which we've made this and it's an experiment. And tell us about, everyone talk about, and let's get you on camera talking about how good the experiment is. And let's get you all, we need a few sound clips of people saying, you know what, love really is blind or whatever. Like they really want to like push home the narrative that this experiment is valid and works. And like we said on the previous, I don't know if we aired it on the previous one, but this is not a valid experiment. It's not reliable. It's like, there's so many issues with this. So, but to even question that seems to be like, how dare you? Like you're shunned from the community and no one wants to hear what you have to say. And it's just so like icky.
And if you're single and have been on the show, you can be on the edge and you still have an opportunity to join the cult proper and be treated well if you get married to somebody, and especially if you have a baby, then you're really in the family, because we remember how hated Jessica Messica, right?
Yes.
I mean, she was probably made fun of. Maybe she was one of the most villainized of that entire show. And so now she comes back with her handsome husband and her child, and she's welcomed with open arms, like very warmly, by Vanessa and Nick. And yeah, there is sort of this feeling of like, I remember watching the first episode thinking this was such an interesting way that people were experimenting with the excess of choice that we have to deal with dating in this day and age, of online dating, where it feels like there are thousands of objects to choose from, like online shopping, right? Where you're swiping and you're just like, maybe that one. And so it can be hard for people to have those, there's all those studies that show that human brains are not very good at deciding past about 7 choices. Mm-hmm. And so it was interesting to watch, I would like to be in an isolated room where I have a very limited amount of choices, and the only way that I can escape this room is by getting engaged and getting married. I remember that feeling of that sort of claustrophobia of the pods, and then the way out is to get engaged, right? Mm-hmm. So I feel like there is a real, again, to go back to that kind of spooky season horror analogy that we're going with this season, there is this cult-like insular claustrophobic sort of thing, and you can only escape the scrutiny if you get married and sort of fulfill the heterosexual dream, right? The heteronormative dream, especially of having children. And, God forbid you get married and don't want to have a child, because then you don't fit in to the culture that Love is Blind is creating around these heterosexual norms, right?
Totally. And it's into like the path to like being engaged and being married and doing all of these things seems like the path, like probably when you're in that claustrophobic like situation where everyone's just professing their love and being like, hey, I'm a perfect person. And oh my gosh, we both love the color yellow. Can you believe it? We're meant to be together. Like, just like the insanity of like what's the word for it? Where it's like Stockholm syndrome, or just like the insanity of being like, oh my God, I'm seeing signs, like that meme of like the math happening, like, wow, you could be my way out of this. And it's probably like the least resistant path, because you're being encouraged, like the behind the scenes stuff of like, you're being encouraged to do those things. Yeah, say yes to somebody, da da da. So, I mean, we've seen it where people leave, and that's, like luckily people can get out. But I feel like if you're on a way with somebody and you have a fight and you get the feeling that your story might be, portrayed on the show, you probably are met with a ton of resistance along the way to be like, I don't want to do this. And like, I don't want to do the experiment anymore. It's probably really, really hard to advocate for yourself to get out of it. You're probably heavily coerced into saying yes to at least go to Mexico. Just make it to the next stage. Just make it to the next stage. And it seems like it might be a bit easier for that to untangle. But still, you also are aware, like that hyper awareness of the viewers. You're aware that you're going to probably get roasted, that your story is not going to be told in a positive light. Like none of the breakups are like, you know what, they just kind of figured out that it wasn't for them, or that they didn't quite, make a connection. It wasn't quite there. It's more just like, you're going to get roasted for like how embarrassing you were, the stupid things that you said, or, how in this case, like how dehumanizing and cruel you were to your partner. Yeah. But, it seems like the only way out is through humiliation or through marriage, which is just like, that feels like a cult.
feels like a cult. So another one that was interesting to watch in the reunion, which, I mean, I feel like it was so much of the show, I would turn it off and be like, well, never getting that time back, just like, that was a real waste of time. Or disturbing, or like, I'm going to have nightmares now or whatever, which I had several nightmares over watching this season. But Steven, we thought Steven was interestingly monstrous as well. And I did find it interesting how, as you said, Monica didn't seem to pick up on certain red flags. Like the scene where they were talking about politics, actually. Mm-hmm. And Steven says, I did vote for Trump. And then I didn't like how he had his policies, so I voted for Biden later. And Monica's just like, wow, that's so thoughtful. And watching that whole scene, I was like, here's this white passing man who also, that story about like, it turns out I'm a quarter black. So like now I'm black. And you're like, hold on, what are you talking about? And Monica is more, I think she's black and Indonesian or something like that. But, he's talking to this woman of color about how he voted for Trump and everything. And in that moment, I just so expected her to be like, that's not going to work for me. Because, if you voted for Trump, I mean, this is a truth that I'm sure there's some nuance to it, but you voted for someone who is a convicted sexual assaulter. You voted for someone who has explicitly made clear that he's extremely misogynistic many, many times, long before his first presidency, and it's only become much worse since then. And so for a woman of color to sit there and have someone say, I voted for Trump, and I think he actually said, I voted for Trump because I didn't like Hillary. He might have said that.
I think he did.
And I feel like that's such an indicator that person has unacknowledged misogyny. Mm-hmm. Because, and I'm not saying Hillary was perfect. Like, again, there's nuance to all of this, but if you just didn't like Hillary and you can't sort of point out what it was about her policies that you didn't like her because she was a woman.
Yeah.
Like, that is the reason that you didn't like her. And we've, the US has never seen a woman president. Canada had a blip with a female prime minister for a minute, and she was like lambasted. I mean, I'm not saying that we don't have these internalized misogynies as well, but I feel like that is, it's sort of like the I don't want to use condoms red flag. Like, that should have been an obvious one, and then the idea that he voted for Biden later, I feel like indicates that he was like, well, there was a man to choose from, so I chose the man. It's like, okay, but let's unpack that a little bit. What do you mean? Like, where was that coming from? Because he wasn't saying, I'm looking back at why I voted for Trump and recognizing some of my internalized misogyny, or like recognizing why I felt uncomfortable with Hillary. Like, he wasn't doing any of that kind of self-awareness. And again, with these kind of surface narratives, like Monica kept saying, he's the best guy ever. I've never met someone as good as him. He's so good. He's so smart. All these things. And we're not seeing it, right? We're seeing him talk over her all the time. We're seeing him spout nonsense. Like, there were a lot of moments with Stephen where I was like, what are you actually talking about? Like, I'm trying to figure out what point you're trying to make, and nothing is coming through. It just would often come through in this highly sexualized kind of language as well, that would have made me feel really uncomfortable. Like when they were in Cabo and he was talking about women wanting to give him blowjobs and stuff, and it just didn't make sense. And it was like, why would you think that random women would want to give you blowjobs, and what does that have to do? Like, it was just a very odd conversation. Yeah. And so, by the time it became clear that he had, who knows what was going on there, but I thought it was hilarious that he was like, I was at a sleep test, drunk texting my ex. Like, as I said in one of my reels, I've had 2 sleep tests and you cannot be drunk for those. That is a rule.
Yeah.
Because it will not be an effective sleep test if you are drunk, right?
Yeah, like, where did you, like, did you drink before you went? Did they serve you alcohol?
Yeah,
like what? Like, what?
Like at the hospital? At the lab, they're like, have a drink.
Yeah, they're like, you seem stressed. Just have, why don't you have a few vodkas,
Yeah.
Red wine. Oh,
Yeah,
it might make me a little,
sense.
It might make me a little saucy. Oh, just go for it,
Yeah. No, sleep tests don't look like that.
No, I know. I'm like, what? And do you think that that people are buying that? Like, that's what's so interesting to me about him and guys like that in particular. Like, he almost glazed over in his eyes a lot of the time when he was talking. And it was funny how one of the issues that came up for them was that he never let her speak. Like, she was just like, you need to stop talking. And I know that actually online I heard that people were kind of like coming for her. And I'm like, no, don't come for her. Tell this guy to shut the fuck up. Like, like no. And it was this thing where he kind of glazes over and he's not actually like seeing her or connecting with her, which is probably why he loved his experience in the pods, because he could just be completely disassociated from reality and not even have a person in front of him. Like, he could just keep talking and talking. And it feels like there's almost a delusion there. Like, it feels like he's maybe buying his lie and he maybe thinks that he's a good liar. Like, just in the whole like sleep test thing, I'm like, this is being filmed. So every person who watches this show is going to watch you say that. Like, is there just no self-awareness? Do you think that you're tricking her successfully because you kind of have this like nice tone in your voice where you're like, I'm really sorry. Even though she's like, you are so disgusting. He's like, I think I should go. Like, there was something weirdly like Pleasantville about his tone of voice throughout all of that where I was like, ugh. Like, it gave me the absolute heebie-jeebies the whole time he would say anything. And I agree, like, in the pods when I sort of felt he was a red, like, instantly I would have been like, and walking out of this room, like, I thought that maybe she would.
Thank you.
But it was just so, and I think part of it is you're really trying to give people the opportunity to grow. You want to see them as people who are mindful and who are really considerate about the ways in which they interact with the world. You really want to hope that for them. But then, again, it's just them kind of saying this random story and it's not really connected. And when you actually dig in there, it's like, wait, what do you like? Oh, and then I voted for Biden. That's not the whole story. The whole story is like, what actually led you to voting for him in the first place? Like, have you actually interrogated that? Because I don't think you have.
And with Stephen, just that whole trajectory, and as you're saying, his kind of glazed over eyes, his not listening, his just talking over, having these strong narratives about himself, maybe some delusion, and where it ended up going, which is that, you're engaged to this beautiful woman who is, as far as I can tell, extremely intelligent and, has a lot of great qualities. And you get drunk at a quote unquote sleep test and then have these extremely sexual texts with someone. I don't know who that was from, but what's going on there? Like, I feel like there's almost certainly some trauma in Steven's past, because what is going on with him? Like that's a lot of unusual behavior, right? That's very self-sabotagey. The way he talked about sex was often quite, again, to go back to that theme of dehumanization, like he would dehumanize himself in this way of like, oh, treat me like a slave or whatever. He had a lot of that kind of language around it. And she was a bit confused by that, 'cause she was like, what do you mean? Like, I don't. And also, how are we talking about kinks on national television? Like,
yeah, we don't need to have
like
that.
Something you might want to keep a little bit more private. And so, I feel like there's more going on there that we don't know about Steven's past, and maybe Monica's past too, and like why she wanted to give him such a chance. Because I feel like that relationship turned so disturbing. It was interesting to watch him in that moment in the reunion of no one wants to hear my side of the story. No one wants to believe my side of the story. And, I don't know, like the way that he behaved in so much of the season and in the reunion makes me wonder what kind of mental health situation is going on there. Like it feels like there's something, maybe narcissism, something like that. I mean, I don't know him well enough to know. Not that I could diagnose somebody, but, it was just something so odd about the way that he said, one wants to believe my side of the story. And again, the coldness, the inability to acknowledge someone else's humanity, the inability to acknowledge that he might have hurt someone. I mean, it was another of many moments of refusing to take accountability for anything that happened. With Monica just sort of sitting in the corner being like, I don't know what to believe. I don't know. She just couldn't, she was like, I don't know if I should stand up for this guy or not. Like, I have no idea what's going on, because there's something so mysterious there. And I feel like that was also something just very disturbing. Like, I know the reality of modern dating is that it is disturbing sometimes. I think many of us have had these really scary situations, on a massive spectrum, anywhere from abuse to gaslighting to, just someone behaving in ways that you can't figure out, right? Where you're just like, why would someone treat another human being like that, or whatever it might be? And so I feel like, with Steven, with Nick, with Hannah, with Tim and his cold, dead eyes, in Ramses, like there were just so many scary men that I feel like, man, it is quite, disturbing to think that these were the options, right?
Yeah.
I feel like there was just so much darkness that came out later down the line that you could still see quite well in the reunion. I don't think anybody had that sort of moment of like, I've really come to understand myself better and why I did the things I did. If anything, I feel like Leo did a bit better than some of the rest of them, at least trying to think about it. I'm not sure he's got it, right? But I think he did sort of, as you said, he had that moment of like, I was treating women like objects and now I think of them as food. Like, isn't that better? Like, no, honey, that's not better, but good try.
Yeah, I remember I feel like Ramses was being like probably roasted the hardest, probably from groups on the internet that saw right through what he was doing in a very public way, where I know that we privately in our little whisper networks have conversations about men like that. But I don't think that I thought that was actually a big win for the culture, for people to like really like unveil this like kind of monster that we encounter all the time, because, he had his little talking points and whatever, but his body language was like, he was like kind of like this and just like did not want to draw any attention to himself, because he was probably like, oh God, I want to get out of this, with that as least harm as possible. I mean, he brought it on himself, but like, yeah, it was hard to watch that. I felt that the internet, even though they weren't having this one-on-one conversation with him, they held him a little more accountable than like Nick and Vanessa and everyone else was able to. And I hate that he got away with saying things like, it wasn't a situation where he said, I would never force her. And it was like, you did. Like, that whole conversation around, like, no, it was a nuanced conversation that we had. No, 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 no. I was like, I still don't really
The
buy it.
nuance is in how thoroughly you manipulated her.
Exactly.
There's nuance in how well you forced her,
And
and
how you can,
how well you hid that you were forcing her, so that from her perspective she didn't perceive that you were forcing her, but actually you were.
yeah,
Because he was basically saying, I don't know if I want to be with you if you don't have sex with me at any moment that I want you to.
exactly.
That's what he was saying. And so, what is she supposed to think except like, well, what choice do I have, right? Like, I either have sex even though I don't want to, or I lose this person. And I feel like, as we talked about in the first part of these episodes, there's so many women that get into situations like that where, it's not this classic version of, held up at gunpoint in an alleyway. 90% of the time sexual assault looks more like this, actually.
Yeah.
It looks more like, pressure over time, using someone's weaknesses against them, like
Yeah.
putting them in a situation where they feel like they don't have a choice. And then sometimes repeatedly, people are having sex over and over again where they're having to dissociate in order to get it done because they feel like they're going to lose the person if they don't. And that is non-consensual sex.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, including me, it was kind of like recognizing that that's non-consensual. Like, you're actually not consenting to that. You think you are in the moment, but you're consenting to it because you've basically been given no choice.
Yeah.
And, that is something that can be really kind of soul destroying, to have that experience, especially repeatedly.
Yeah.
Where you feel like you have to do something that you don't want to do. Like, if you don't want to do it, even if you're saying like, yes, it's okay, like I've gotten myself in the mood, or I've had enough to drink, or whatever it is, it's still non-consensual, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately. And it's just part of the issue is that we're in a culture that we're still, I know these are heavy topics, but we're still very much in a rape culture, right? We're still very much in a culture that does tend to see women and feminine people as more objects, and men as more full human beings.
Yeah.
I think there are things about that are changing. I think that there are a lot of people that are trying. I think a lot of people are trying to kind of wake up to all of this and figure it out, people of all genders. But ultimately, that is kind of what the culture says. And so I think, for a lot of people, it's just normal to do that, right?
Yeah.
And, this is a culture that doesn't respect a human being. And I'll include men in this too. I think rape culture affects men in some negative ways as well. But in neither case is it this feeling of like, oh, this human being has a right to their sexuality, feeling safe and feeling honored. And their sexuality being something that they're choosing to share in a way that's like a really beautiful exchange between two human beings, right? So much of the time it is a performance, it's a competition, again, from any gendered perspective. It's like, I have to do this because if I don't, I'll be in trouble, or he or she will be mad, or they will be mad, or like I'll get in trouble in this way, or there'll be passive aggression, or whatever it is. So we end up giving away our sexuality in ways that don't feel safe to us. And that, it really hurts. Like, it hurts who we are at our core.
Or like, this person isn't picking up on my nonverbal signals that I'm not interested in this. So it's probably just easier if I just get it over with. Like, I feel like, there was a big moment in the culture 5 or 6, 7 years ago, maybe now, where that story came out. And I remember that for a lot of people went, like, the ball really dropped for a lot of us, where I, for myself, I was like, I feel like that's the majority of my sexual encounters was that. And at the time I had mostly been having sex with men. So, I mean, not to say that can't happen in different kind of dynamics of gender and relationships, but just in my experience. And, it's like, that's not, like it should feel really positive and beautiful, and you should really want to be doing that, because it's a very invasive experience. Like, if you don't want that, it's, your nervous system, even if you're like, okay, fine, it's just easier if I don't engage in this conflict, right?
Yeah.
Where the person is really putting on a lot of pressure, it's like, that's exactly what you're saying. It looks like this insidious thing that is like just not, and the fact that this man is able to sit and look at Marissa and just be like, well, I don't know, like, I don't know if I want to be with you.
Me,
Yeah, she was too much. Like,
reunion. He said something like that at the end, and
Yes.
like, well, it was like in him trying to explain his himself. He was like, I just felt like I started to realize that she would have been too much for me, which is just like, oh, I feel like added on to everything that we just said.
Yeah.
It's, you know, most women and feminine people I know have been called too much or not enough at some point in their lives. Like many of us have that sense that we're on one or the other end of the spectrum at any given moment of time, right? And for him to just be sitting there and continue to be like, she was just too much for me, it's like, okay, she's going to take that on as that's my problem. That's because there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a really important reframe, which is that his capacity wasn't large enough for everything that she was. Like, he was too small for her.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. Period. Because it's like, this guy is literally like, doesn't have the capacity to like be around your energy when you've been commuting because he doesn't want to move. Like, you've been commuting for 2 hours every day. You do this really difficult, like you're in school, like you're articling or something as to be a lawyer. Like, and what is he doing? Like, he actually kind of sucks. And I'm so relieved that they did not get married. And I think her mom even said that. She was like, I'm really glad that he ended it because she would have been way too good for him and, given too much to that relationship. And I feel like that's exactly what the audiences are seeing, that like, oof, he didn't have a way to weasel out of that, in where he found a way to, he said some things like, I take accountability. I wrote this down. I should have been forthcoming. And I wrote, shut up with that language. Like, nobody's buying it that you understand what either of those things mean, that you know what it means to be forthcoming, that you know what it means to take accountability. Like, all of that language, it's like the fallacy of it all is completely fallen. And nobody buys it that you understand what that means or that you care, especially when you're saying it alongside these things of like, well, I really don't like her. Like, cool, you're a jerk. Like, you don't have to say it like that. Like, there's a kind way to break up with somebody when you're not interested in them. And maybe you should have done it in the pods when she was in the military and that was like completely against your...
A total deal breaker for him.
It's like, why did you say yes when she was like very forthcoming about how that's a big part of her life? Like, I get it. Have a strong value around that. I personally like don't see any issue with being like, that's a deal breaker for me. I think that's totally fine. But like, don't say yes then. Because if that's a deal breaker, you need to acknowledge that it's a real deal breaker.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe I'll say a little bit about that because I have my own relationship with that conversation. And so my husband is in the military, and I feel like I held that Ramses-like belief for a long time of just, if you're in the military, you're an idiot and we don't need a military and militaries are for jerks or whatever it is. Like, I don't know, I had a very strong sense that, the military is for fighting and doing these horrible things. And that's not something that I agree with, right? And as I kind of got older, well, actually for a while I was working at the Jericho Mess and I was bartending for a bunch of soldiers and just like getting to know them and learning their stories and why they had joined the military, which for many of them, they were these young men that had come back from war and they had joined the military because it was the best option for them financially. Yeah. And they didn't have any expectation that they'd actually be fighting. They just thought they'd be in the military for a little while. They'd gain some money. The military pays for a lot of education and things like that. They weren't expecting to actually be, in that combat situation. And a lot of them came back with PTSD and a lot of other things. And it was just very interesting for me to kind of get to know them in that way. And sort of, again, I was dehumanizing with that idea of just like everyone in the military is a jerk. It's like, that's not seeing people as human beings, right? And so, it's been interesting getting to know my husband and his perspective in it. Because, it's both and, like, there's all of these issues. There's definitely a lot of really problematic issues within the military. Mental health within the military is a joke. Mm-hmm. And the way that they treat their soldiers is dehumanizing. Again, like, it can sort of feel like you have signed this contract and we don't care about your health, we don't care about your mental health, we don't care about your family, you're just going to do what we're going to do, which is partly how the system works. And so, there's sort of this, you can sort of see both sides of it. But again, I'm continuing to get to know like the real people that are involved in these systems. Some things they agree with, some things they don't, but they kind of have to go ahead with it. I think it's a bit different from the Canadian perspective, from the US perspective, which is a little bit more like rah rah, go for it. I think at least the story with the Canadian military is that the attempt is to aid, and peacekeep and things like that. But sometimes that can look like violence, and it's just complicated, right? And so I feel like when Marissa was trying to explain that, like, I'm proud of my time in the Navy, and I believe in the people that I was working with there, and also some of the things that I was doing I found I didn't agree with. And so she's kind of left with this double-sided feeling of like, I didn't like the choices that the military was making, and also I believe in myself and the choices of the other human beings that were with me, and I want to be able to be proud of that time at the same time, right? And I feel like when Ramses was just like, well, I can't be proud of you for that time, like it's a shameful part of your past and that's the only way that I will look at it. I feel like that, again, it's just that naive leftist sort of view where it's like you're not actually thinking about human beings, you're just picking and choosing like a belief from this side of things, and you're just saying like military is bad, end of conversation. And it's like, well, yeah, some of that is true, but I just think that it bothers me when someone comes with this, I'm a progressive man, I'm a feminist man, I hold all of these beliefs, but there's no humanity underneath that. It's just, I'm holding these beliefs because I think these beliefs make me look good, and they fit the identity I think I have. But I'm not going to actually spend the time thinking about what this means to me, and I'm not going to let the human being in front of me change my mind or give me a different way of perceiving things. Because I think it takes some maturity to look at your views and be like, maybe there is some more nuance to that, or like maybe that's not the whole story, and maybe I was wrong, right? Which is kind of what I went through in this whole experience, and my feelings toward the military remain complicated, but they're not single issue, they're not monolithic. And so I feel like Ramses just didn't have the sensitivity or the maturity to even listen to what Marissa was saying, because I feel like she did have that very nuanced view and like very vulnerable, honest kind of like, I totally agree with your problems with the military, and also there are things that I'm proud of, and she should be able to hold on to that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's sort of two things that we're talking about when we talk about somebody in the military. It's like, do you like agree with like the imperial project, which I think is what the military serves. It's the imperialist colonizer project. And so I think that it is absolutely worthy to be critical and say, I disagree with the actions of the military. I will use my voice politically to like speak out against the illegal occupations with the current illegal occupation of where we currently exist. Like, I think that it's absolutely okay to criticize that. I think it's okay to criticize people for making the choices to enter the military with the nuanced understanding that sometimes it seems like the best option. Like, I agree with you that a lot of the time the recruitment process is very coercive, and the training process can be very dehumanizing from what I understand. But yeah, at the end of the day,
it's sometimes the only choice someone has.
Yeah, exactly. It's sometimes the only choice to like survive in this nightmare. And then a lot of the time when people return from the military, they're treated like garbage. And there's like a great deal of like homeless veterans. And so it's like you can't hold so truly on to that belief that you dehumanize the person who's now a victim of that same system. It's like we have to understand that that's a broad system that's at play. And yeah, I feel like Ramses, felt very strongly about that and was very critical of the American imperialistic project. I thought it was great, actually, that they showed that conversation, because I don't think that those perspectives are really shown a lot on television, especially in like a reality TV scenario. Like, is anybody really mentioning Palestine in reality television? Like, I don't think that they are. I don't think the housewives are really having that conversation. So I actually really appreciated that, because I don't think that his criticism was necessarily like bad. I think that my issue with him is more so that he put that on her as like something that she should therefore be responsible for. And like change about her past. It's like if you cannot even if you believe that somebody's choice to join the military implies a certain kind of values that you cannot get past, I think that that's an okay acknowledgement of your own situation. But to then continue to engage with that person, it's like, how are you even doing that? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me, because like I thought that he actually had a lot of really incredible nuances to invoke in that conversation and to bring forward. I think that it's very powerful to say to this like very like monoculture mainstream audience, like, American imperialism is bad. Like, I don't think that people really, obviously the online space is a little different, but in this reality space, I don't think that conversation is really happening. So like, I think that I was like, oh, good. Like, yes. And I actually really appreciated that, where he lost it for me, and where I agree with you in the sense that, like, is he clout chasing with a lot of that rhetoric? Has he found a good way to say a lot of these things, and a way that would, like, really challenge some of these views that some people would hold? I found it very fascinating in the conversation with her girlfriends, where they were like, so you just don't think that that's okay? Like, what if she wants to join the military again? Like, I think that it was okay that he was like, no, I don't think I'd be cool with that. Because I do think that that's like a great discomfort to sit in for a lot of people who are like witnessing these conversations happening, more broadly probably now, in the last year, with the escalation of the occupation in Palestine. But it's like the question of like whether he's just saying that for clout. And then I think when we see him have this conversation with her where he's manipulating her sexually, it does sort of like, I remember in that moment being like, oh, that really sucks, because you were sort of like introducing this conversation. And now I think a lot of people will discount all of your opinions and everything that you said because of how shitty you're being to this woman. And you are being shitty to her, and you are being a manipulator, and you are being so horrific and gross that it's like, yeah, it does. It is that thing where it's like the internet loves all or nothing thinking. The internet loves to ignore nuance. And so, the nuance of like what, he's, I mean, it is, yeah, I understand that it's complicated, and, we could get into a whole political conversation about the purpose of the military, but obviously it's more about how he like completely misused his understanding of leftist language to just like manipulate a woman into just like having sex with him whenever he wanted. And it's like, okay, so are your beliefs on the military founded in any real basis, or is this just like a thing you say to try to seem smart and cool? Like,
yeah, I feel like, we went a little dark there towards the end.
Yeah.
Like we got into cults, we got into sexual violence, and we got into the complications of the military. And maybe this season did show some more complex conversations than other seasons have. And it was absolutely the most disturbing, spookiest, scariest, most horrifying, most monster-filled season of Love is Blind that I really remember seeing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I wonder if it sort of went from going like, look at these straights being so like boring. Why do they always talk about like, like people being like, my husband's my best friend is such like a straight woman coded thing to say. And like, just like, what are their personalities even? Like, remember in season 1, we were all just like, oh, these sticks of butter, like have no personality. Yeah. Like, I miss those days of just laughing at how boring and like plain and just like completely basic everybody was. And now we're just like, oh, like this is a grotesque thing, and people are awful, as I'm sure people have found the online, Tinder or the apps dating world to be, or just the in-person dating world to be. It's like, it really do be bad out there. Like,
yeah,
this
is so beyond just the run-of-the-mill attachment issues that most people run into when dating. And unfortunately, these are some of the issues people run into with dating. Narcissists, hidden children, sexual assaults, like, lying, misogyny, misandry. There was so much in this season that like is real. It's a real part of dating, and also dear God, like, I hope dating isn't always like that at every moment of time. Like, I hope there's also some run-of-the-mill attachment issues that are coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have that too.
Let's go back to like our daddy issues and just
Yeah.
ride
What
that
happened to
wave.
just our regular old daddy issues. Okay, so thank you so much again, Emilee, for joining me for part 2 of this podcast on season 7. I never want to think about it again. And yeah, we'll come back with the next fluffy thing we want to talk about on Popcorn Therapy.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Emilee. Bye.
Bye.
So thanks for listening to part 2 of this episode on Love is Blind Season 7. You can get in touch with me on my website, juliepeters.ca. You can follow Popcorn Therapy on TikTok at Popcorn Therapy. I'm at Julie Peters Wellness on Instagram. And please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, follow, share it with your friends. All of those good things really help get it in front of people. Write a review, leave a comment, all of that stuff matters. And thanks so much for listening again to Season 7, Popcorn Therapy.